Hello, I'm Chris with Atlantic Drain. Today we're going to be replacing a couple of check valves. You can see this one here has failed. There's a large slit or crack in the no hub on the top side of the check valve. This one's a little bit tricky because there's lots of water that's coming into the basement underneath the floor. It's a 9-10 foot ceiling, so we're down into the hydrostatic table all the time. So the first thing I'm going to do is just shut down power to the pumps. That's both the DC pump and the AC 110 volt pump. So we're on the clock. Let's see if we can get this done before it fills up. Again, be sure to disconnect the power to all pumps in the pit. Disconnect DC wiring to the battery as well. The check valve is an important part of your sump pump system. When the sump pump begins its cycle, the check valve opens, removing water from the sump pit through the discharge pipe going up the wall. So I'm trying to keep it contained and keep all the water inside of the sump pit. All the water that's going up to the discharge point outside the wall is now filtering back down through into the pit. As I loosen the upper clamps of the check valve assembly, the head of water from the check valve to the top of the wall all comes back down into the pit. Some of those clamps may be a little stubborn to loosen. So be sure to use a flathead screwdriver, medium blade or larger, and the length of your screwdriver should be at least 6 inches on the shaft. Alright, I've got the clamps loose on the no hubs of the check valves, and I'm taking both of them off of here, and you can see the water's about half full in the pit. We do have the luxury of no water inside of the perimeter drain, and that's pretty long, so it's going to have lots of time to fill up in there as well if needed. The sump pit is down into the hydrostatic table all year round. Be sure to think through all the steps needed to replace these check valves before you begin. Alright, that was the battery backup check valve, and now we're going to take off the main check valve that's coming off the 110 volt AC. Looks like it's about a 1/2 horsepower pump down there. Carefully remove those old check valves, especially if there's some wiring that's connected to it, or in this case a DC float switch for the DC pump. So yeah, look at that. That thing was split, ready to just totally fail, and that's the one off the main pump, and it would have just been spraying all over the basement and flooding as well, because there's a lot of water that's coming in here. Okay, I'm about ready to install the first check valve, and you want to make sure these arrows are pointing away from the pumps. In other words, they're going up the wall. Loosen the clamps on the no hub that will be attaching to the existing 1.5 inch pipes, both in the pit and going up the wall. You may want to prep these no hubs and check valve for installation before you disconnect your old check valves. Alright, I've got the arrows pointing up and away from the pump, and I want to make sure that when I secure this, I'm securing it where I can use the screwdriver to tighten it down properly, and then if it ever needs replaced in the future, it's easily accessible. Remember, stay focused. The water level has already partially submerged the new check valve. So I'm still on the clock. I made sure that this clamp is super tight and that the nose hub is down on to the discharge of the sump pump real well. It's all the way up to this lip. Let's go ahead and tighten up the upper clamp, and you make sure that this pipe is all the way down to the lip of the nose hub. So I'm tightening each clamp on each end of that check valve. While testing the operation of these check valves, I will tighten them again. Alright, I've made sure that these 4 clamps are all super tight. Can't turn that pump on yet. Still have to install the other one before you can turn it on. You know, even if your water's coming up, if you turn that pump on, it's just going to come back out and discharge into the pit. So let's get this other check valve on. Alright, I think we're ready to install this. Once again, the arrows point away from the sump pump. Most backup pumps that are installed in a pit are going to be direct current or 12 volt DC. A check valve must be installed on the discharge of that backup pump. Although the water is rising inside of the pit, there's still plenty of time to take care of this double check valve replacement. Alright, these are all positioned so that they can be secured down or removed for the next maintenance period. But these are all on there so tight, and you can kind of feel to make sure that your pipe is down inside. It should be very hard, not soft. Make sure it's all the way down to the lip. Same here. Feels good. I think we're about to turn it on just to empty the water that's accumulated. You can see that it's about half full into the perimeter drain pipe already, and you know, I turned the camera off just to catch my breath, and it's filling up fast. Alright, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn on the main pump, see if these things are leaking or if I have any leaks. Alright, it's pulling water. There's a lot of water. It's still coming out of the pipe over here, so it might take it a minute to remove all the water. So I'm just checking for leaks. So I'm going to empty this out, and I'm going to clean out some gravel that's in the bottom of this. Make sure everything's set properly and sitting in there to where it's not off kilter or anything. While you're in that sump pit, it's a good idea to pull maintenance. Clean out the bottom of the pit of all mud and rocks or debris. You've gone the distance to replace those check valves, now go the extra mile. This will help to ensure proper operation of those sump pump impellers that are removing the water from the pit. Alright, I can see there's a little leak here. For some reason, I gotta find out what that is. I brought down a couple dry rags. We're gonna find out just where that's leaking. So we want no leaks in the system. So, as you can see, pulling maintenance and getting to know your sump pit lets you watch the sump pump cycle enough times to thoroughly test the operation of those check valves. I checked it, it just wasn't quite tight enough. That's now stopped. I don't have any more leak there. No more dripping. I think that one's good to go. Sometime during your system pump test, be sure to go through and retighten all clamps. You may find that you can put maybe another quarter turn on each one of those clamps. Alright, now here's where positioning comes in. This thing's running continually because the backup pump, the DC pump, is underneath the float switch. I think I'm going to go ahead and pull this off of here as far as for this first clamp and just articulate this lower pump and pipe just a little bit because it wants to go over towards that float switch. With double check valve replacement, you will have adjustments that will need to be done. Again, I say, be sure to take your time to ensure proper operation of both the main pump and the backup pump. And you probably couldn't really see that very well, but I loosened this clamp, then I just twisted that 45-degree fitting and pipe so that this backup pump would move away from that float switch. So that needs to have freedom of movement so that it can remove the water or go back down once the water's been taken out, so the pump will turn off. And again, I am going the extra mile to ensure that the backup pump float switch is working properly. And it's not perfect, but it's a lot cleaner than it was. And now this little bulb's functional. Before it just was kind of hanging up right here and may not have turned on properly if the water level ever gets up to that point. Use tie wraps as needed to secure the backup pump float switch. Alright, so I've put freedom of movement for the backup pump for its float switch. And that way, if the main pump ever fails, that'll switch on properly and be able to shut off properly. I'm going to address these cables up a little bit, get them out of the way of these float switches, especially that backup switch. They were both on, just getting kind of close to being tangled up on that float switch. It's so important to keep those cables organized coming out of the pit. So dressing them with tie wraps and securing them to pipes above the sump pit lid makes it so much easier for service of the sump pump systems in the future. And that'll get them out of the pit as well. Alright, so that's all dressed out in there. And we'll just test this back up. I can hear it kicking on. Always double check pump operations. So we're good to go. I'm Chris with Atlantic Drain, reminding you it's easy once you know how.